On this episode, we discuss Hell in a Cell results, Ryback's return, Wyatt versus Ambrose, Henry's heel turn, Randy Orton versus The Authority, and tons more now on Byte That. Welcome everyone to episode 62 of Byte That, the somewhat maybe spooky professional wrestling podcast where we talk about the ups and downs of that which we love, which is the boogeyman, and he's coming to get ya. Thanks to everybody that listens to the podcast every single week. Remember, we are available every Tuesday night. iTunes, Stitcher, TuneIn Radio. We got the YouTube channel, youtube.com/ByteThatCast. We're available every single Tuesday night. And if you want to interact with us, you can check us out on Twitter @ByteThatCast. My name is Juan Velas. I am from San Juan, Puerto Rico. And as always, I'm joined by the Byte That team. First, all the way from Boston, Massachusetts, we got Ryan McNulty.
Juan, it's interesting you actually made a boogeyman reference, because I saw on WWE's YouTube channel, I don't know if you guys have seen it yet, but the boogeyman was actually scaring people at WWE headquarters. Pretty cool video.
Yeah, apparently they got him back for that one-time appearance, and he was probably hopeful. You know what? I'm coming back. But nah, you go back to them independents, boy. And speaking of independence, all the way from the Double F in Manitoba, Keith Poshik.
Hide your kids, hide your wife. It's time to podcast.
Absolutely, man, because this is a really, really packed episode of the podcast. I mean, we got Hell in a Cell, we got Raw, all the things that happen in both things. So, you know what? Let's just go right into it. Sunday, Hell in a Cell happened. First, we're going to do sort of an overall impressions, and then we're going to go into a couple of specific things we want to get to about the show. So first, taking it to you, Ryan, what was your overall impression about the pay-per-view?
Overall, Hell in a Cell was a lot better than I expected, and one thing in particular I'd like to give almost a standing ovation to WWE if the clapping would not completely screw up Keith's editing. So anyway, my hat is off to WWE. 2 weeks ago I talked about, hey, Rollins, Ambrose might be the main event. Then last week, we were in doubt. We thought with the stipulation for the title match that Orton and Cena would main event. So my hat's off to WWE. They took a chance. They made Rollins Ambrose the main event, and that to me shows that they have a lot of confidence in these guys. I was really happy to see that. The pay-per-view overall was completely solid, but that to me was the highlight.
What about you, Keith?
It's like Ryan said, it was just nice to have Ambrose and Rollins main event the actual pay-per-view itself, and they didn't do what we all expected them to do, but I'm sure we're going to talk that point to absolute death, so before we go into that, I just want to say that the pay-per-view itself overall was a very solid pay-per-view. There wasn't really a bad match on the card. There was a couple of alright ones, but nothing really stuck out like a sore thumb, and what more can you ask for, really?
Yeah, I agree with both. Overall, it was way more than I was expecting. I was really thinking WWE was just going to throw Ambrose and Rollins to the bottom of the card, and instead, we're going to talk about that match, but you can tell they're definitely relying really heavily on these two guys for the future because holy crap, everything that they allowed them to do. And just a quick note, we haven't talked to each other about Hell in a Cell at all. Like, we watched Raw together, and we promised to remove any references about the pay-per-view. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what you guys think about a couple of things. But we're going to sort of talk about the most, surprising thing that happened, which obviously is that as that match was about to end, we saw that Mr. Bray Wyatt, lights go out, then we get some smoke and mirrors going on in the middle of the ring, and then all of a sudden...
No Cody Rhodes, though.
No, not at all. And then all of a sudden, Seth Rollins wins. Obviously, the people were very quiet. Nobody really knew how to feel about that. We sort of felt bitter. The internet was dying. Now that we can actually talk about this amongst ourselves, Keith, taking it to you first, how did you react, number one, when Bray Wyatt came out, and number two, when you saw that 3 count happen the way it did?
It was very surprising, exactly like you said. For some reason, I didn't see it coming at all, Bray Wyatt interfering in the match, but it was very disappointing at the same time because it was such a good match. Like, we were looking at match of the year or candidate up until that point, and then it has to end dirty. Like, couldn't it just have a nice definitive finish? We get 2 Hell in a Cells a year. Can it not be like that? Like, that's why they put it in a cell so nobody can interfere, yet it happens. That's no bueno.
So for Keith, sad face. What about you,
Sad
Rhino?
face.
I agree with a lot of what Keith said. I was really into this match, so it was super disappointing to see it end that way. Rollins and Ambrose have been feuding for so long that this felt like, this was actually worthy of a Hell in a Cell match. It didn't feel like, it's just because it's the pay-per-view. This feud was worthy of it, and that's generally a time to conclude a feud, but instead we got, sort of a BS ending with interference and in a cheap win that Rollins gets. So it was just disappointing. It's cool to see Bray Wyatt back, but it's not this way. Couldn't you wait till after the pinfall or something like that? It was a letdown.
Yeah, I think before we move on, it's a matter of, we're having a great match. I don't think anybody doubts that Bray Wyatt and Dean Ambrose can have a really good feud. But come on, give us a break. Let us enjoy this match. And if you're making it the main event, it was okay. It would have been okay for me if they actually flipped the switch between the Cena Orton match and this match. If this match had been halfway throughout the show, I would have been like, okay, you can do the Bray Wyatt thing there because then we get the clean finish. Although I would have hated that switch to have happened. But at least it would have concluded the pay-per-view, which seems to be a problem with a lot of the things that the WWE is doing right now, which we'll get to also. But now that we've gotten that dirty finish, let's actually enjoy the match itself, because I can't wait to hear you guys talk about it. So which one of you wants to go first? We got Seth Rollins, Dean Ambrose. Obviously, there's a very specific spot that I want to get to, but just overall, how much did you enjoy this match?
Was the spot that you're talking about the one where Joey Mercury climbed the cage? Because that's probably spot of the match.
No. It is in no way that.
Was it the headlock?
No. Oh, no. It was when the match actually started. Dean Ambrose came out looking like a Cena Warrior Princess or somebody holding a sword to his back with. By sword, I mean kendo stick. But no, I'm talking about...
and then it's the one where they were hanging off the side of the cell and they both fell through freaking announce tables. That spot?
Yeah, well, Shawn Michaels came back, man. It happened.
Exactly. It's awesome. That's probably the closest we're going to get to something like that spot, like as crazy as it's going to get. And quite frankly, it just set the tone for the whole match, how great it was.
Yeah, and... before this match, there were a lot of rumors that Dean Ambrose wanted to do something that we haven't seen before. Obviously, we've seen that spot before. I mean, it was pretty much the Shawn Michaels spot where he was thrown to the announcer table. But
because they took it to another level and they both went through tables.
Exactly, and you have to consider the fact that this cell is way higher than the original Hell in a Cell. So arguably, I think this spot was actually in a way more dangerous than the original one.
Well, they were a little bit ways down the cell. I'm going to go super nitpicky. No, it was a great spot. The only thing that I think kind of killed it for me was you could clearly see the Spanish announcers removing things from the table.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh, gee, I wonder what's going to happen. Obviously that's being super, super nitpicky because, I mean, these guys put themselves on the line and they did all they could to put on a great show, and it really was an awesome match. I like recently how even with this huge cell that they've been utilizing outside activity within the Hell in a Cell, because there's only so much you can do sort of inside of it. It's been exhausted with 29 matches that have happened. So it was nice to see that. And I liked all the fighting at the top of the cell, and I don't know where I'm going with this, so Juan, take over.
No, for me overall, I have to say the match was really, really, really good. That's right, I'm not saying amazing, and it's to no fault of Seth Rollins and Dean Ambrose. Because for me, and I want to get your guys' opinion on this, the match itself where WWE a couple of years ago, where they had to be so nitpicky about their own production, because you could see the holes in the cell, so you could tell obviously where they're going to climb. What you mentioned, the Spanish announce table, then the camera angles were so perfectly. It's like, oh, I wonder if they're going to go through that table. It's the combination of all those things, plus the very obvious commentary, like Michael Cole. Throughout the whole thing, I was just like, please shut up. Can you please give me maybe a percentage that like this may actually not happen? But the commentary was like, yeah, this is about to happen. Oh my God, this happened. Did you see this happen? This happened. Oh my God. It was that combination of things that really took this match almost like a star off, if you were to give like a 5-star rating or something. But the match itself, I thought it was awesome. Great job by both guys. Obviously, I think that the interference at the top of the cage actually really contributed to the match, because, as you mentioned, Ryan, what else can you do in the cage match nowadays where you can't even have blood? There's obviously certain limitations, so you sort of stall and make the match a little bit longer by doing things like that.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but they did do new things inside of the cell. Like, when was the last time somebody actually leaned a table up against the cell?
I don't really remember. I mean, I've seen things like that. I don't think it's the first time they've done that. However, that powerbomb spot, although it kind of sucked that it, the table sort of didn't break where you could tell they wanted it to, and it sort of looked awkward. But they were being really creative with the things they had. It almost makes you wonder what would have happened between these two guys in the Attitude Era, knowing all the things that they can do. Hello, I mean, Dean Ambrose is
they
one
would
of
have died, probably.
Yeah, Dean Ambrose, like, he's been involved in death matches, as Jon Moxley. Imagine how far they could have actually gone.
I believe your answer to that is Mick Foley.
No, and somebody that was on Raw last week.
I also like that, even though obviously it was never going to happen, that Rollins was trying to get, the goons to basically throw Ambrose off the cell. Like, he basically just wanted to, like, he was planning to legitimately, like, murder him.
Yeah, and, like, having both of those people on the cell actually made you believe that, hey, somebody might actually go off, because they could throw the goons off and then still have a great match.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that you wouldn't
screw
get
their personal safety.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Exactly.
like, who matter? Who cares? And that's why I think that interference made sense, because otherwise you would have never gotten that commentary from Seth Rollins. He actually got a little bit of character development because of that. So overall, I think that match was exceptional. Going back to the conclusion, with Bray Wyatt being involved, we actually have a question from WWE Sponge Fan, who I originally thought said WWE SpongeBob Fan, and he asks if we're excited for a Dean Ambrose Bray Wyatt feud. Are you?
Just think of the promos. That's what I'll say.
I think that's what a lot of people are sort of insinuating, that this feud will be very promo heavy. I mean, we even saw that on Raw, that sort of Bray Wyatt is saying that, I can see a lot of similarities between you and me. What do you think, Ryan?
Exactly what Keith said about the promos. I mean, that's probably going to be the highlight, in the fact that we've got kind of two crazy personalities going head to head. Who's crazier? I guess we're going to find out. My bet's on Bray Wyatt, but it's going to be very interesting where they go with this, because it's like you were saying, Juan, how Bray Wyatt's been saying, basically, I am you. So are they going to actually go somewhere with this, or is this going to just be Bray Wyatt's kind of, just his speech that it sounds like it means something, but it really doesn't mean anything. So I hope it goes a little bit further.
Which brings up another question asked by Pro Skills Gamer on Twitter. And he asks, do you think Ambrose is going to go down the card because of his feud with Bray Wyatt? Now, I'm adding just a little bit of context to this. We've talked about it multiple times. We've seen what happens with people that face Bray Wyatt. Nothing happens. So, yeah, will this make him go down the card?
Absolutely not. I don't think so. It's just it's like a little placeholder thing, because they're gonna go back to Ambrose and Rollins eventually, right? So throw this good feud in the middle.
That's we don't know that as a fact, but we'll leave that in the oven for a little bit.
It's really not. going down the card when there's only a world title match now at every few pay-per-views. I mean, this is going to be one of, if not the featured singles match at Survivor Series. I mean, we see that there's going to be some Survivor Series team versus team. Looks like we're going to get Orton and Rollins. So Bray Wyatt, Dean Ambrose is just, one of the top 2 single matches on the pay-per-view. So I wouldn't necessarily consider that going down the card.
See, I'm going to go with that's the only big singles match that's going to be at Survivor Series. I don't think we're going to get Rollins and Orton. That's probably going to be thrown into the whole Survivor Series 5-on-5 match.
Well, that's true. He could be in Team Authority. You're right.
Really, it's going up the card because they're basically the main event.
They are the singles match because I think we're going to expect the Authority Survivor Series match to main event.
Now, obviously, one of the things that people are sort of commenting about this is that we didn't really get a conclusive finish to the match. Now, this match isn't the first time. I mean, even at Raw, hey, guess what happened at the end? This seems to be a regular occurrence. But even with these type of feuds, because like right now, it's like, hey, guess what? Now it's Dean Ambrose and Bray Wyatt, and Dean Ambrose came out of Raw. And it's like, you, Bray Wyatt. It's like, what happened to this whole thing that's been happening with Seth Rollins? And you, Keith, you mentioned something that's really interesting. Is the WWE afraid of giving us clean finishes?
I think they are, but with people that they're establishing, I think they're so afraid to make the people that they're going to make the future lose cleanly just because it'll hurt them. You know what I mean? Jelly Bean?
I get you, man. I get you. You got to protect. You got to put on that condom, boy.
But does it really protect them? Or is it just, do we just get tired of seeing the same old dirty thing over and over?
Yeah, I don't know how I could pull back from that condom comment, but I get you. So
just pull out.
Oh, my God. Anyway.
What happened to our clean tag, gentlemen?
I don't know, but no, I understand where you're coming from, because it's like, if you give a conclusive finish, you can make one guy look better than the other one. So when they move on to another feud, there's like a pecking order. Obviously, by doing the whole interruption thing, then that sort of doesn't happen. So right now you have Dean Ambrose here, and then Seth Rollins with like the whole Authority, Randy Orton situation, and both of them look good. So Ryan, where do you sort of rely on this? Do you think that the WWE can justify the lack of clean finishes?
Well, I'm trying to figure out if what I'm about to say makes sense, but there's sort of this dynamic where I talk about how wins and losses mean nothing, but they mean nothing in a certain way. When it comes to within their own, let's say kayfabe competitive story making or whatever. I worded that terribly. But you know what I mean? Winning to get a title shot. Yeah. That generally doesn't mean anything. John Cena could lose 10 matches in a row and get a title shot the next night. But the wins and losses do mean something when it's kind of how important you are in the company.
Yeah.
So it's weird how it works like that. But I think WWE just, they've backed themselves into a corner where they've made wins and losses mean so much about how important a guy is in the company, like so much that they're afraid to, let people lose in a certain way. They're terrified to just have people trade wins every once in a while and things like that. So
I think the word you're looking for is establishment. Like an establishing win or an establishing loss. That's what they're afraid to do.
But it's like they back themselves into a corner countless times where they put two guys in a match who they deem can't afford to lose,
Because you notice they don't do it with people like Randy Orton and John Cena. Like, that was our clean finish for the night at Hell in a Cell.
Yeah, and I think that's where guys like Chris Jericho come up, RVD, which is like, we get it. You can have a veteran, but if you have them lose every match, what does it matter that they're a veteran? But at the same time, like with Jericho, then he wins a couple of matches, becomes one of the top heels, becomes one of the greatest characters in his feud with Shawn Michaels a couple of years ago. So The Miz is another great example. The Miz was in a huge losing streak, main event at WrestleMania. Now everything else is a different story, but the fact of the matter is, yeah, what pretty much Ryan said, wins and losses don't really matter. It's those 1 or 2 conclusive victories out of the 30, 40 that they may have in a year that really make a character. So maybe does that sort of go where you were talking about?
Sort of, and I think they get really afraid with having guys like how Rusev probably is now, having guys they're building up lose. They're terrified to have them get a couple, like they got to go on this huge win streak all the time. But generally, like what we saw with Ryback, once they start losing, then it looks really bad. But if he had just lost a couple times down the road, now it doesn't look as bad. So it almost makes it worse when they go on these undefeated streaks. And then once they lose, it makes them seem like really bad.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could even make the case for guys like Bo Dallas. There are a ton of guys where basically they give them a lot of time, and then it's like, hey, you're just going to lose now. Yeah.
We kind of talked, I can't remember how long ago it was, but we talked about this at some point. When somebody debuts, it's like a huge peak, and they keep climbing and climbing, and then when they lose, it's just boom, right into a valley. It's almost like they need to establish a middle ground and have them coast at that middle ground.
That's almost why they have factions like Nexus, NWO, because since there's a bunch of guys instead of that one guy, it sort of masks those losses, I guess.
Last point to summarize is basically, is WWE afraid of clean finishes? Yes, because they want to have their cake and eat it too. That's exactly why.
Exactly, Ryan. Great way to summarize. Now, before we split the show into the part that I know you're waiting for, Keith is getting that money shot ready.
Oh, yeah.
We got to talk about the other Hell in a Cell match between John Cena and Randy Orton. Now, we've already sort of covered, I guess, by accident, some of the things, John Cena and Randy Orton, the wins and losses. The overall feel of the match is what I sort of wanted to get to, because for me, and I want to take this to you guys, it annoyed me how easily everybody was kicking out of everything, particularly John Cena. It seemed like no matter what Randy did, it was like, nah, I'm good. And it wasn't like he wasn't selling. Like he just got up, and like even the finish of the match, you'd think Hell in a Cell, he would sort of, be a little bit more human.
One quick question. Is the whole finisher then crawl to the pin thing just like a lost art?
Pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, with a move like the attitude adjustment, he's made it a thing. So as soon as he hits it, he like pops up a little bit and quickly goes for that cover. And the RKO also has that same scenario. So it's interesting because it's 2 moves that are like immediate pin. And they take that. Like when you hit a guy with a pedigree or like a stunner, that the guy can go like a little bit farther away, they got to go get him. But here, that doesn't really apply. Did that really take some of the enjoyment out of the match for you guys?
Yeah, I mean, I thought it was a good match, but exactly like you said, it just got really ridiculous at the end. It was going all WrestleMania 29 on me, Rock versus Cena.
Pretty much.
Where it felt too much. Felt like too much. And I think, as we were saying, it's kind of a lost art. Like, I feel like wrestlers a couple years ago, you go further back, they did more to protect their finishers, whether it be waiting longer or other things like that, where it's very rare that someone would kick out of a finisher to an immediate pin.
But at the same time, there's a way to do that right. Like, think about all the Undertaker WrestleMania matches. All of those boil down to just finisher trading back and forth. But this was the opposite of that.
Exactly, because at least in those matches, even, we have the infamous zooming in on the Undertaker's head when Shawn Michaels kicked out. And it was that moment of like, okay, now they got to rethink their strategy. They got to sort of fall back a little bit. In this match, it was very much like, you know what? I'm going to hit you with my finisher. It failed. So I'm going to hit you with it again. It failed. So I'm just going to put you through a table, whatever.
And at the same time, I don't know, this is a weird thing to complain about, but it just felt like they were going through all of their old matches again, just like the AA into the RKO spot. That was a spot for a couple years ago. But at the same time, how do you do something original when you're in your 140th match with the same person?
I have a question of physics. How does doing an RKO from an AA hurt less than just taking an AA?
Stone Cold Stunner logic? I don't know.
No, it's an amazing point because notice how even in the replays, you see he takes the bump the exact same way it would be an attitude adjustment.
Yeah, no
Then
kidding.
magically he grabs Cena's head and the gravity changes, man. It's like climbing a ladder. All of a sudden, you're not in a ladder match, you can climb it. It's a ladder match, boom. It's like just, you cannot climb that no matter how hard you try. And I'm just going to point out, I know we seem a little bit nitpicky about this match, but these are two guys that we've seen for over a decade, okay? We have to get nitpicky at this point with them, you know?
Because what else is
Exactly.
there?
What do we got?
By the way, I hate to put anyone on the spot. Does anyone have any idea what the actual like win-loss record is between Cena and Orton in their singles matchups?
Oh, I saw it the other day.
I'm curious to see how lopsided it is.
It's very lopsided. Cena's wins are in the hundreds, and Orton's is maybe in like the 10s and 20s.
Well, I'm curious more about like televised, because obviously house shows, you know, Cena's gonna win 99% of them.
You know what my answer to that is? Way too many. Way too many both. It just should not be the case, you know? But overall, I think it was a pretty good match. But yeah, you know, we got 2 Hell in a Cell matches. What are they going to do for next year? I really don't know, because the Hell in a Cell should not exist in a PG era, because they went really far out to try to really, you know, do something, and they did a good job. But what can they do next?
One quick little tidbit is apparently Elimination Chamber is getting a name change. It's going to be called like Fastlane or something like that.
What?
So
Please, no.
Yeah, I don't know. I could be wrong about the name. It was something like that. Fast, Furious, whatever. Vin Diesel.
Yeah, so next year's Too Fast, Too Furious?
But basically, my point is, this could have been the last Hell in a Cell. Maybe they're going to change the other themed pay-per-views as well. So, just a little minor point there.
Hell in a Cell, you've been good to us, but if you were to rest in peace right now, I think I'd be perfectly okay with it. And speaking of something that should rest in peace, it's time for this week's Tweet of the Week.
That's right, everybody. It's time to rip in pepperoni with this week's Tweet of the Week. Tweet of the Week.
I cry every time.
All right, this week's Tweet of the Week is brought to you by Mr. Sid Bridge on Twitter. His handle, Sid Bridge Comedy, BRIDGE. He sent out a tweet in regards to the Bella Twins match at Hell in a Cell, which we did not cover, but there's probably a good reason for that. It wasn't that good. All right, This week's Tweet of the Week is, really, wishing they had put their names on their tights. I have to look at boobs to tell them apart. Hashtag HIAC.
It was a good match, Keith. What the hell?
It was all
It was
right.
it was better than AJ Page.
You know, it was a good match
Yeah.
for the Bellas. It was a good match for the
Podcast
Bellas. It was an
on hold.
all right match.
No, the Bella Twins straight out outdid AJ Lee and Paige. They did.
No, this is a
Who would've
podcast
th-
on hold.
who
Even
would've
my
thunk it?
reference right now. This is going on.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Who would have thunk it? You know that the Bella Twins would outdo Paige and AJ, but they
All right.
straight up did. It was a damn good match, and I give them a lot of credit.
Yeah, so, Keith,
alright.
you're wrong, okay? You're wrong.
All right.
You don't get to have an opinion.
And thank you
I
for
don't.
sending that
That's
beautiful
how this
tweet of the
goes.
week. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at ByteThatCast. We tweet during Raw and during the week because we're cool like that. Remember to also check out our YouTube
We tweet
channel.
during the week.
YouTube.com/ByteThatCast. We got some cool this week. I'm going to be talking this Thursday about Monday Night War. This is just one of my favorite series on the network. I cannot talk right now, but I love the series. I think it's way better than it has any right to be. If you grew up watching the Attitude Era, and if you didn't grow up watching the Attitude Era, this fills you in Picture like a documentary that's like 20 to 30 hours long, and it's segmented in such a way that it's just awesome. Check out my review this Thursday. Ryan always has his special videos on the weekends, which, Ryan, I need to take a couple minutes here. Just sort of fill us in on what we're currently working on.
Well, last week's video was basically an announcement to our listeners and our subscribers on YouTube to help us create our next countdown video, which is going to be a top 5, and the category is going to be themes that were better than the wrestlers. So just to give you an example, like I said in the video, Maven, guy who his career never really took off, but his theme pretty awesome. So you can actually head over to that YouTube video and make sure to leave a comment on it with your suggestions. So there's going to be a top 5. So obviously, only so much real estate to fit in there, but we are going to have an honorable mention section. Yes, that's an ambulance going by. Maybe Cesaro's near. I don't know. But anyway, leave a suggestion, give a theme that you think was better than the wrestler and a reason why, and it'll be guaranteed to be featured. Thank you. Is that Scott Steiner now? Okay.
By the way, quick note, I can guarantee Cesaro will not be on this list.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Justified.
So, if you leave a comment with a theme and a reason why, you're guaranteed to be in our honorable mention section. I'm done one. Please save me.
Let's keep going right now. We're going to talk about Raw. And you know what happened on Raw? Changes and people coming back. You know who came back? The big guy.
Ryback.
We got the Feed Me More chance. And you know what? I missed him. Ain't going to lie. I really missed Ryback. I thought that his thing with Curtis Axel, I couldn't care less about Curtis Axel, but Ryback was being awesome in that whole thing. And now we got him. He's a babyface. The last year and a half never happened, apparently. So going over to you first, Mr. McNulty, what did you think about the Ryback making his return?
See, I don't like what you just said there one bit. You said the last year and a half never happened. And that's what I'm afraid of with this situation, is because Ryback comes back, and I'm happy about it. He's going to be a baby face. That's all great and all. But I think there are some positives to take away from the last year and a half of his heel run, was that he got a personality, and a pretty fun one at that. And I really hope that that's not lost on this new babyface character, and he just goes back to square one, because I think there was a lot to gain from that. So I'm hoping to see a little bit of both Rybacks here with this new babyface run. But I'm excited for it.
Exactly what Ryan said. It's cool that Feed Me More Ryback is back, because now we have that little slot to fill on Raw that just sees jobbers get squashed. But it would be cool if they add a little bit of personality, like he doesn't just cut a promo where he's like, Raw, Ryback, feed,
And one thing that they really can't go back into doing is the squash matches, because what can you do after that? Right now we have Rusev filling that role, which, I think we're guaranteed to have like a Ryback-Rusev match. I'm pretty sure that's what's going to be happening eventually. But before that, Ryback just can't be the white bread babyface. They got to have some kind of personality. And guess what? He's always had it. If you go to his Twitter, all his stuff, he's always had this. WWE just finally went like, you know what? We're going to have you run with it. Be yourself is all that you can do. And then when you go over to WWE's YouTube channel, they actually had an interview by Eaton Styles, and he was actually showing that personality, basically saying like, you know what, the past year or so, I became a bit of an asshole and all that, but I'm going to make up for that, and I'm back, and I'm better than ever. I'm going to support the fans. And it's interesting to me, because if you guys haven't had the chance to check that promo, anybody listening, it's interesting because he said the same thing every babyface says. Hey, I love the kids. I love the good guys. But the way he said it, it felt real this time. It actually felt like it was both the person and the character believing in what they were saying. So I really hope that just keeps going on. So for those listening, are you happy that Ryback is back? Send us a tweet at ByteThatCast. And if you're listening right here on YouTube, all you got to do is look down. post a comment, and we'll definitely read it. Among other things that happened, something related to Ryback, because when Ryback turned heel, it was because he lost a match against this guy that turned heel on Raw, Mark Henry. And we were talking about Mark Henry off the air, I guess you could say, in the way that we just don't really care about what happens right now. Be it with the Big Show situation, the patriotism situation, or even this. Does anybody really care that Mark Henry's heel? How did you guys react? Is there anything we can even talk about this?
Well, do you remember the night that Ryback turned heel? Do you remember exactly what night that was?
Night after WrestleMania 29, right?
The night I won my Slammy? Yes, it was.
Well, you didn't win it that night. That's when the thing happened that you got nominated for. But go ahead, Keith.
I won it. No, that's all I had to say. I don't care.
Okay, Ryan, what do you think?
It's better that he's a heel. That's pretty much all there is to it. Mark Henry is much better when he's just beating the hell out of people and doesn't care about what they have to say.
In the Hall of Pain.
Or when he's doing fake retirement speeches.
Yeah,
so,
actually, I do have something to say. It would be cool if they brought back the Hall of Pain and actually made it relevant.
Can they please use a cover of that song? Because if so,
will the Hall of Pain get a physical place before the WWE Hall of Fame does? That's my question.
I would actually love that.
Like when he retires, he opens up a restaurant and it's just body parts of his victims.
Why would you want to eat at the Hall of Pain? That sounds like the worst idea.
Everything's served on a hand.
It's a spicy food restaurant.
Oh,
so many things that we could bring up here that we just, between the sexual chocolate and everything. Let's just move on to Randy Orton, shall we?
There's sexual chocolate mousse. There's your dessert.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, everything served on a hand because Mae Young. Okay, I got it.
All right, hey, to all of our listeners, tweet to us. What would be on the menu at Mark Henry's Hall of Pain restaurant? I want to hear your suggestions. We just came out with a couple good ones on the spot. I look forward to your responses.
That's going to be pretty awesome. I'm looking forward to that too, actually. So now that we've gotten Mark Henry out of that portion, something that I'm actually really, really pumped for. I just hope that they don't drop the ball. And I'm glad that Randy Orton lost at Hell in a Cell, because it means that now he gets to feud with the Authority. He came out on Raw and the man was on fire. Like, he grabbed that microphone, and that is the Randy Orton that I miss. Like, just everything that he said, the way he said it, his mannerisms, just everything about him was awesome. The crowd was really into it. And when you have a guy like Triple H that you can feed off of, his stare, just the way he's looking at you, it was freaking awesome.
When Randy Orton clicks, he's the best in the business. He was in full Dylon mode on Monday. He was just on fire. But if this is the Randy Orton we're going to see going forward, kind of this not face, not heel Randy Orton, I'm very excited. But I don't share your opinion that he should have, or you're happy that he lost at Hell in a Cell, because I'm not a fan.
Like Keith, I'm not a fan of Orton losing at Hell in a Cell, but we all thought, hey, maybe Lesnar would be there for Survivor Series. But obviously that's not the case, so you don't get the whole St. Louis title shot thing, hometown, whatever. So maybe it works better this way. I don't know. Either way, like you were saying, the intensity of Orton, the just dropping Rollins with an RKO, it was hard not to love every bit of it. And someone pointed out in Squared Circle, he was the first guy in wrestling history to get told to take a night off, and he actually did take the night off after that.
Yeah.
But, great to see this Orton. They needed to mix up the Authority a little bit, so I'm digging it.
And just to clarify, I'm not happy at all that Randy Orton lost at Hell in a Cell. I am happy that something came out of it, because if he would have lost and then just like nothing, then it's like, come on. But even the little things, the fact that, I don't know if you guys caught on, the way that the camera angle was done on Raw, I could have sworn he was going to RKO Joey Mercury because he was right in between him and Triple H. The way the camera was there, Joey was like peeking his head a little bit, just perfectly set up for the RKO. But no, he shoves Triple H aside and gives Seth Rollins the RKO. So it's little things like that I'm really looking forward to. Now, you brought up something, Keith, that I completely forgot to add to the podcast topics, but I got to bring this up. Sure. John Cena. John Cena won at Hell in a Cell. More than that, my reaction to John Cena winning at Hell in a Cell was just like, okay, we get it. Play the music, do the whole thing. Even on Raw, when he was cutting a promo, it's like, okay, Cena's doing his promo thing. Can you please just get over that? There were Let's Go Cena, Cena sucks chants. Even those, I'm like, can you please just cheer him? Like, just cheer him because the dual chant only makes this segment go longer. It's gotten to the point where I don't like Cena. I don't hate Cena. Just, can we please move on from Cena? Or even get a theme change. Something. Please. Am I the only one?
I have a question for you, Juan. Have they been teasing the heel turn for so long that you'd actually be sick of the heel turn at this point?
Yes, 100%, man. It doesn't even matter. Anything that they've teased, because what else? They've teased everything with John Cena, Dark John Cena. It's like a freaking Pokemon or something, you know? Whatever they want to do with him, I just don't care anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this is the third time he's going into a match with Brock Lesnar, whenever the heck, third time this year, whenever the heck that match is going to take place. But once again, the whole temptation to the dark side thing, it's so played out, and especially because they've done it so much recently. They haven't even spaced it out by like more than a month. So I think everyone's kind of over it. We know Cena's never going to turn heel unless there is like the next Stone Cold Steve Austin that takes his spot. So it's tired and it's old, and it's time to just try a different approach.
Keith, you asked me something. I'm going to sort of bounce back something to you. You asked me, even if he turned heel, would I care? What would it take for you to go like, okay, this is a fresh new Cena. I'm willing to give this Cena like another year.
You guys would totally care if he turned heel, by the way. We would all care a lot.
I would all care.
I would care for a week. And then it's like, you know what?
No.
Because it just won't happen.
Full of it.
Because it just won't happen. This ain't Hulk Hogan.
But if it happens.
Okay, hold on. No. You just mentioned Hulk Hogan. Nobody thought Hulkamania would turn. He did. Nobody thought Austin 316 would turn. He did. I am still in the park that John Cena will one day turn heel. And now that there's people that they're building like Bray Wyatt, I know he's not exactly a face, but Dean Ambrose, Seth Rollins, there's all these people to fill that spot potentially. Roman Reigns, when he comes back, he could be a big contender for that. I think they have enough that they're building that it's okay for him to basically do what Hulkamania did all those years ago and completely reinvent himself.
Well, yeah, I mean, you can look at Austin when he turned. You at least had the safety net of The Rock being there as your top babyface. They just need that safety net of the next guy. And I've said it before, once the kids are asking to see somebody else, then you can turn John Cena.
Exactly. It's such a sour spot because I agree with everything you've mentioned, Keith, but there's a really big factor that you didn't mention, and it's not X-Pac. It's that back then, wrestling was a wrestling company. Now WWE is Sports Center.
Wait, wrestling was a wrestling company?
Wrestling as a whole. I know it sounds weird, but that's it. Wrestling, be it ECW, WCW, WWE, NWA, they were a wrestling company. Now it's WWE and like things sprinkled around there. You got Ring of Honor, you got TNA, but they're all the way down at the bottom. Back then, you know, there weren't like Make-A-Wishes being done on a consistent basis by a wrestling company and all that stuff, and there wasn't like a huge international market. You got all this stuff now. I mean, we brought it up like a month ago or so. It's like, did wrestling get way bigger than it should have been? The answer is yes, to the point where unless, what you guys mentioned, unless the kids like get 500% behind another guy to the point where that other guy's doing the Make-A-Wishes. CM Punk was arguably that guy. And look what happened. Daniel Bryan was arguably that guy. We could potentially never see him come back again. And even when he does, I'll always make the argument that the WWE will not give him that push because of his injuries.
You know, TNA, ROH, they're wrestling companies. WWE is a corporation.
Exactly.
Basically.
But my counterpoint to that would be Stephanie McMahon. She plays both sides of that. Like, she's the heel on TV, but off of TV, she's still doing all the stuff for charity. She's playing the friendly person. So they could have these two John Cenas. It is possible. It doesn't have to be like straight.
One is enough, man.
Yeah, well, 3 ain't enough. He needs 5. But, you know, it doesn't have to be quite Hulkamania, like telling the audience to kiss his backside and that they all suck, but just John Cena to turn on the audience could just create this huge ripple.
And realistically, he doesn't even need to turn heel. He can just be the anti-hero, which...
How did we get into a John Cena heel turn conversation?
I don't know, because everything... You know, we got Dean Ambrose debuting. That was imminent. It happened. So all that there's left is the John Cena heel turn or rioting, which will never happen. But now here's another question I'm throwing to everybody that's listening out there, because we always talk about the John Cena heel turn, but there are like 1,000 ways you can be heel. Would you want it to be thugonomics? Would you like him to be just like a corporate Cena, the same way we got corporate The Rock? Like, what type of heel John Cena would you love to see, if you'd even like to see him be heel at all? Let us know by sending a tweet or by leaving a comment here. And speaking of people that get involved like that, before we close out the show, I know, Keith, you have a question that you must read so we can answerify right here, right now.
Indeed, we had a falcon come down from Mount Everest with a scroll to answer with words that had words and questions. Yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but anyway, our good friend of the show, Mr. Shycat11624, asked us a question on the Twitter. The question is, what moments during the Attitude Era do you wish had social media? Like, if we could go into a time tunnel and have our smartphones, what moments would you mark out and wish everybody else had that time tunnel about?
I have 2 answers. One of them I'm going to leave for the very end because I'm going to get some heat for that. The first one, maybe something like Stone Cold in the beer truck, simply because we talk about Attitude Era as if it's this time that people loved, yet when you look back at forums, people were complaining about Stone Cold, The Rock, and it would have been very interesting to see that immediate reaction of like Stone Cold, you know, pouring the beer over the McMahons and all that, because I think people will be just crapping all over it.
See, I didn't jump into wrestling until the very end of the Attitude Era, but I'm going to kind of cheat this a little bit, and there is a moment that I did wish I had social media, but it was in like the Ruthless Aggression era, you know, just after the Attitude Era, and that's when Kane was unmasked for the first time.
Yeah.
And I remember after that Raw, it's just I wanted to hear everybody's opinion of it. And I mean, there were forums at the time, so that did help. Obviously, you know, it would be better to have Twitter and, you know, things like the Reddit Squared Circle, but the forums are pretty good, but definitely would have wanted more social media experience during that time.
That's interesting because my answer also involves Kane. It's that night that they basically devoted an entire episode of Raw to building up the character of Kane when Paul Bearer did all those vignettes to The Undertaker about, oh, Kane's alive! And that I would love to see how different that would have gone if there was social media. Like if people would talk about it, or they would just pull up all this information about Kane and just make it the worst. I'd like to know if that could happen again.
I could just see like a bunch of Isaac Yankem pictures coming up.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, oh, his real name is Glenn Jacobs, or something like that going on. For me, I got to bring up another thing, and I know this is gonna sound very weird. And that's when the whole Blue Blazer thing happened with Owen Hart. When he suffered that accident, simply because those moments really sort of put us together as fans, like when the whole Chris Benoit thing happened, Eddie Guerrero, but keeping the context of the Attitude Era. when, it was realism. It was like everything was like over the top, exaggerated. I wonder if people legitimately thought, like the ones watching on TV and all that, if that happened, and just sort of like what their reaction was, because we always like don't know like what the age, what the demographic was back then, who was watching, that type of thing. It would have been fascinating just to see.
In a lot of ways, though, it's good that there wasn't, because everyone with a phone camera or something during that incident, that would have definitely been disrespectful to his legacy and all that. But yeah, I mean, that was such a big deal. I wasn't even watching wrestling at the time, and I remember hearing about that all day during school. I mean, that was such a tragedy.
Yeah, and that's why I mentioned the people on TV, because there's also the bitter side of social media where, the morbid part, and that we could definitely do without. But thank you, Shy Cat, for that awesome question. Keep sending those questions, everybody. We love interacting with you guys. So without further ado, Mr. McNulty, close out the show.
All right, well, we want to thank everyone for listening to this Halloween edition. We talked about so much Halloween stuff, right? Didn't we? But before we go, there we go. There's our Halloween stuff. We did it, guys. We did it. So let me just throw the social media plugs at you, of course. Our YouTube channel, youtube.com/ByteThatCast. Check out Juan's video on the Monday Night Wars coming up this Thursday. And also check back on our top 5 video. Thanks for interrupting me, guys. But yeah, that top 5 video I posted, where you can post your suggestions for top 5 themes that were better than the wrestler. Don't forget to also follow us on Twitter at ByteThatCast, and check out our Facebook, facebook.com/ByteThatCast. Remember, you can catch this show not only YouTube, but iTunes, Stitcher, and TuneIn Radio. So thanks again for listening, guys, and we'll see you next week.
And as a special tidbit, you know what? You mentioned the whole Halloween thing. Do yourself a favor if you're a wrestling fan. Halloween Havoc, Eddie Guerrero, Rey Mysterio, one of the greatest matches of all time. Am I in it? I'm Joe Laurinaitis. We'll talk to everybody next week.